This is the opening movement of the Symphony No. 10 by Sir Peter Maxwell Davies. And this performance was the world premiere that was given at the Barbican Centre in London on the 2nd of February 2014. The artists were the baritone Marcus Butter, the London Symphony Orchestra Chorus, and the London Symphony Orchestra, all conducted by Sir Antonio Pappano. He had personally been invited by Sir Peter Maxwell Davies to conduct the world premiere. Although it's a symphony, it has vital parts for the chorus and the solo singer, and choral works with soloists are our focus in this programme in our 4-part series celebrating the 60th birthday of Sir Antonio Pappano, Mission for Music. Peter Maxwell Davies's 10th Symphony was inspired by the work and also the life of an artist who had exerted a profound influence on him since 1957, when he was in his early 20s. And it was then that he'd experienced the buildings of the 17th century Roman Baroque architect Francesco Borromini. They ingeniously give an impression of wide open spaces that are in reality contained within small physical confines. There was a bitter personal rivalry between Borromini and the architect Gian Lorenzo Bernini, and the feuds between Bernini and Borromini's volatile and often depressive character formed the basis of the inspiration for the symphony, together, of course, with the architecture itself of Borromini. And additionally, there was another unexpectedly close dimension in the work of Borromini for the composer as he set about writing this symphony. He wrote much of it when he was dangerously ill in hospital with leukemia, and in fact he very nearly died while he was writing it. And Borromini, in a suicide note, actually described the process of his own death during the 3 days that it took him to die after the act of taking his own life. While Sir Peter Maxwell Davies was in hospital, Sir Antonio Pappano visited him many times to discuss the score with him, and he soon felt that the symphony is a work that has a particularly strong and significant appeal for him.
The idea of writing a piece about a Roman architect, Borromini, remembering that I am the music director of the orchestra of the Accademia di Santa Cecilia in Rome, so there's a very strong connection. I've seen these frontispieces of the churches that Borromini built, designed in a very particular fashion. Of course, it's a fascinating subject because his rivalry with Bernini, who is perhaps slightly better known, is something, almost for the tabloids. I mean, so when he described the piece to me and its dramatic content, then I was drawn very strongly to it. And the piece is a 4-movement symphony. This is his 10th symphony, remembering that the number 10 when it comes to symphonies is always a very, very, it's a difficult hump to get over. And my goodness, with Max, actually he wrote most of this piece in hospital. He was diagnosed with leukemia and was undergoing treatment for a long, long period of time. So the piece is very, very strong, a tremendous pathos and genuine pathos. Starts with a purely orchestral 15-minute first movement, which is dark and quite forbidding, but at the same time very, very lyrical, almost looking to the insides of someone. And I think that it conjures that up absolutely beautifully. Second movement is very interesting, choral movement. And it takes texts, genuine, real texts, criticisms of Borromini. Because his vision was controversial and against tradition, he was considered a fraud. And so you hear the chorus in unison with the orchestra, but quite complex chords, but moving in the same pace as the orchestra, sort of picking at him and clawing at him, very Beckmesser-ish, and really very, very cruel. And mentioning the name of Bernini, and you are not an artist, you are not an architect, you're a manual laborer, they say of him. Then we meet Borromini himself in the person of a baritone, and we hear him giving instructions to the builders. And, you know, if you do this here and fit this there, and this will go here. And, a real architect, but a visionary. And so this is a peek into the mind of this genius.
Non regge la volta per non aver contrasto da due parti e l'angolo isolato cede mi risolvei con l'aver fatto in quella parte la loggia per i musici. D'ingrossare il cantone isolato 11 palmi, il che ha posto in sicurezza detta fabbrica, ed oltre la sicurezza ha dato comodità di farvi diversi camerini.
fourth movement is set to music, the words of Borromini's Suicide Note. And Borromini took 3 days to die because he stabbed himself, but it took him 3 days. So he was able to write about his death, his impending death. So it's tremendously dramatic. And here, the bass baritone comes into his own. And it's very, very descriptive, very operatic. And here he uses the chorus in a completely different fashion, because he uses the chorus in a very, very benign and archaic, almost Renaissance intoning of the names of all the churches that Borromini built in Rome. So against this wailing, dying man, you see his creations. They're set off in the background. It's very, very beautiful, and ends with this gorgeous hymn, very tonal and very, very beautiful.
Finalmente, essendomi ricordato che avevo la spada qui in camera a capo dal letto, essendomi anco accresciuta l'impazienza di non avere il lume, disperato presa la detta spada, qual avendola sfoderata, in manito di essere appuntato nel letto e la punta sul mio fianco. Poi mi sono buttato sopra di essa spada, alle quale con la forza che ho fatta a ciò che entrasse nel mio corpo, sono stato passato da una parte all'altra e nel buttarmi sopra la spada sono caduto con essa spada messa nel corpo, giù nell'abbandonato e ferito di sopra. Ho cominciato a strillare e allora ecco l'aghetto Francesco e ha aperto la finestra e già si vedeva l'una e ha trovato colpo in questa mattonata e la luce di altri e è stata levata la
from the world premiere of Sir Peter Maxwell Davies's 10th Symphony, conducted by Sir Antonio Pappano in 2014. 2 years later, in March 2016, leukemia finally claimed the life of Peter Maxwell Davies. And as it happened, that was almost on the anniversary of when he had written an obituary to Benjamin Britten, who had died in 1976. His obituary, which appeared in the journal Tempo in March 1977, ended with these words: "The world is colder and lonelier without the presence of our supreme creator of music." Maxwell Davies was, of course, referring to Benjamin Britten as an English composer there, but he also meant his words in an international context. Britten reached people all over the world, and never more so than in his War Requiem, written as a tribute to those who died in the First World War. There are 3 soloists, choruses, and a large orchestra, and the work was a daring innovation in that it combines the setting of the Latin Mass with poems written by Wilfred Owen, poems written at or near the front during the First World War. Wilfred Owen died shortly before the end of the war in combat. This is a work that means a great deal to Sir Antonio Pappano, and in 2013 he gave a performance in Rome with his Santa Cecilia Orchestra and Chorus. And for the soloists, he cast Anna Trebko as the soprano, Ian Bostridge as the tenor, and, remembering it now, Thomas Hampson as the baritone.
I don't think you'll find another War Requiem recording that is so lucid in telling the story of the psychological drama of the 3 protagonists and the Greek chorus and the orchestration. And it's because Tony is so astute and dedicated to the why of any music, why it was written, what is it telling us, what is the protagonist, whether it's orchestral or vocal or soloist, what is the protagonist carrying in their heart and mind in this moment of musical language that we should listen to? And with that driving question at the beginning of, or it seems to me, an instinctual beginning of how he makes music, he lets that guide us into the different ways that a Mozart or a Debussy or a Ravel or a Shostakovich or a Britten or a Verdi or a Puccini managed to do that for their publics. And this is what I treasure in Tony the most. We're on the same page. I would just say Tony is always concerned about legitimate parameters of finding the why in that musical language. The why being, why was it written?
Save the undone years, the hopelessness. Whatever hope is yours was my life also. I went hunting wild after the wildest beauty in the world. For by my glee might many men have laughed. And of my weeping something had been left, which must die now. I mean the truth untold, the pity of war. pity were distilled. Now men will go content with what we spoiled, or discontent boil bloody and be spilled. They will be swift with swiftness of the tigress. None will break ranks, though nations trek from progress. Is me the part of this retreating world? Into fate citadels that are not walled. Then, when much blood had clogged the chariot wheels, I would go up and wash them. From sweet even from wells we sunk too deep for war. Even the sweetest was that ever were. I am the enemy you killed, my friend. I knew you in this talk. For so you frowned yesterday through me as you jabbed and killed. I parried, but my hands were low and let us sleep now. Let us sleep now.
the closing section of Britain's War Requiem. We heard "None," said the other, "save the undone years," followed by "Let us sleep now," going into "In Paradisum deducant angeli." Thomas Hampson, Ian Bostridge, Anna Trebko, and the chorus and orchestra of the Accademia Nazionale di Santa Cecilia, conducted by Sir Antonio Pappano, a performance given in Rome in 2013. Although Benjamin Britten was a very individualistic composer who sounds unlike anyone else, there are in the War Requiem some occasional striking similarities to a requiem written by another composer that Britten thought very highly of, and that was Verdi. Both Britten and Verdi combine an inward intimacy with a theatrical and almost operatic element sometimes. And both works were written for the people. Britten speaking for the world in its terrible loss of life in the First World War, and Verdi, whose requiem was written in sorrow for the death of the great poet Alessandro Manzoni, Verdi nevertheless was speaking for the people in this requiem, wanting to offer comfort to all the people of Italy for any bereavement that they had suffered. And both works also have extremely detailed markings of expression for the choruses. And in the performance that Sir Antonio Pappano conducted of Verdi's Requiem Mass in Rome in 2009, he took exceptional care for the chorus to be observing absolutely the markings of Verdi, for instance, coming up now at the very beginning of the Requiem, which is marked first of all sotto voce, in an undertone, almost like whispering, and then il più piano possibile, as absolutely quiet as possible. And in the orchestra, beginning with the cellos, with mutes pianissimo, and then sottovoce, and then con espressione, with expression. Requiem aeternam dona eis Domine, et lux perpetua luceat eis. Eternal rest give unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. The opening of the first movement of Verdi's Requiem Mass. Later on, it opens out into Kyrie eleison, and that is where we first hear the solo singers. They have extremely demanding parts indeed to sing in this requiem, maybe more so in some ways than in many other requiems. Sir Antonio Pappano explains why for him this is so especially important.
I've conducted the requiem on several occasions, and each time I find that the character of the soloists is sometimes even more defined than his operatic characters. I mean, the imperious nature of the mezzo-soprano, and with the book of judgment, I mean, she's frightening. When the tenor speaks in his ingemisco, this lament, I see there a prisoner, a convict, before judgment who doesn't stand a chance. The bass, of course, is perhaps more conventional, but even he has moments of enormous tenderness and vulnerability. Salva me, when he says, Salva me. It's quite amazing, the humanity. The soprano, angelic but becoming so human in the finale, and the mezzo becoming so human in the Lux Aeterna.
lux aeterna luceat eis Domine. May eternal light shine upon them, O Lord. The mezzo-soprano Sonia Ganassi. And the soloists we heard before were the tenor Rolando Villazon and the bass René Pape. The soprano that Antonio Pappano cast for this performance of Verdi's Requiem with the Santa Cecilia Orchestra and Chorus in Rome in 2009 was Anya Hatteros, conveying now in the finale, Libera Me, what Sir Antonio called the angelic but becoming so human quality, and conveying it wonderfully within the inspired direction of Maestro Pappano. Deliver me, O Lord, from eternal death on that awful day when the heavens and the earth shall be moved, when you will come to judge the world by fire. I tremble and I fear the judgment and the wrath to come when the heavens and the earth shall be moved. The day of wrath, that day of calamity and misery, a great and bitter day indeed.
Libera me, Domine, de morte eterna, in Dio tremenda, quando cieli moventi sunt eterna.
Sir Antonio Pappano has conducted Verdi's Requiem Mass many times, and the tremendously deep impact of his conducting in this music has made a huge impression on audiences. Two connoisseurs, Anne-Marie Coleman and Elisabeth Meunier, tell us why.
The reining in of the power of the orchestra and releasing it all of a sudden. I mean, tremendous. And it's the intelligence about the reading of the music.
I had the opportunity to listen to one of his performances of Verdi's Requiem with his orchestra and chorus from Santa Cecilia. It was an incredible illustration of his talent. I thought I knew his work well, but I was out of breath during the whole performance. So intense and relentless the tension was. The orchestra and the chorus were as the soloist, conveying something completely consistent and intense throughout the whole piece. He had not only understood Verdi, but been able to drive the performers through his wonderful and crystal clear understanding. I had rarely felt such intense emotion while listening to any music.
From the performance of Verdi's Requiem Mass conducted by Sir Antonio Pappano in Rome in 2009. He had conducted it many times before that performance, and he has conducted it many times since. Like all Verdi's music, Sir Antonio has a very profound understanding of it and a very, very deep love of it. And that goes back a very long way in his life.
You know, I've been conducting Verdi for a long time, but I've only felt in the last few years that I've, in terms of the opera, really felt that I was maybe hitting upon what's really there on the page in terms of sound, in terms of the dignity, nobility of Verdian utterance. I mean, let's say that in a grand way. But strangely enough, with the Requiem, that's a piece that I conducted from very, very early on. And my exposure to it was also through the work of Romano Gandolfi, who was a famed chorus master of La Scala. And I met him in America. I happened to be his assistant for when he conducted it in my town of Bridgeport, Connecticut, believe it or not. He came over from Italy, didn't speak a word of English. And I was his pianist, his translator, everything. So I learned so much. And then from when I first conducted the piece from his assistant, Vittorio Sicuri, in Barcelona at the Liceo, I was a pianist there, and Vittorio filled in some of the information that Romano Gandolfi had in his bones, but he gave me the specifics and the enthusiasm for the theatricality of the text. So that's been a piece that I've really understood and have had a relationship for a very, very, very long time. And each time I feel like, yeah, okay, it's a dear, dear friend, but we can know more about each other.
Salve Domine de morte eterna in die illa treme.